Hi everyone, Emily here. Today I'm going to share with you some simple tools that you can use that may help to quiet your inner critic. These are also somatic tools known to help us resolve shame or start to come out of shame if that's a place where we're feeling stuck. So let's talk about shame for a moment, because oftentimes if we have a really loud, harsh inner critic, it's because deep inside of us somewhere there's a large amount of shame about something about us, about ourselves, about who we are, or something else in our past. So we are going to bring some curiosity today to the ways shame plays a role in our bodies every day and also how we can work with it. A few thoughts on shame. What the heck is the point of that emotion, shame? Well, my understanding is that shame can actually serve a purpose for a short period of time as an important teaching tool when we're children. The important thing that happens, though, is that after a parent or a grown-up shames us for our behavior in some small way, they then repair that experience where they reassure us, the child, that even though we may have messed up and done something we weren't supposed to do as a child, we're still innately good. We're still innately acceptable and lovable and worthy of love and safety and protection. But of course, that doesn't always happen. A lot of times we're shamed for various things in childhood and then there's no repair. And we don't have any way out of that shame that starts early in our childhood. So it becomes something we internalize, and we end up growing up with beliefs like I'm not a good person, or I'm not worthy of love, or there's something fundamentally wrong with me. So I wanted to share a little bit about shame so you can understand how it does serve a purpose, but just for a short period of time, and we're meant to move through that, not carry it around with us forever. But how the heck do we get rid of it? Because man, when shame has its hooks in you, it's really hard to move through that. So today I'm going to share a couple ideas for you. The first is a top-down exercise where we're using our thoughts and reframing a little bit. And the second exercise is a bottom-up exercise, using the body to respond to the sensations and the posture of shame and actually helping our nervous system release some of that energy and move into a different feeling state altogether. So we'll begin with the top-down exercise, which is, again, working with the inner critic that stems from shame. A lot of the time, we want to be curious, what is the inner critic saying? So often, the inner critic manifests itself in just looping negative thoughts about the self. So it might be beating yourself up about things, saying really mean things to yourself, like if you said it out loud, you would feel kind of terrible coming out of your mouth. But again, thoughts are involuntary. They operate on a loop. They often just loop and cycle and pop in and repeat multiple times throughout the day. And of course, they can have a big effect on how we feel. So let's be really curious about what that core thing is that your inner critic is saying. So common core thoughts that I hear frequently in my somatic practice that the inner critic might be saying could be, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, or parts of me are unlovable, there's something wrong with me. So you can maybe choose one of those if it feels right for you, or better yet, be really curious, what is that sentence that you have on repeat throughout your day, especially when you're feeling stressed. That inner critic voice might be really loud. So be curious, try to identify what are those words, what are those thoughts that the inner critic, that shamed part of me, is saying. And the first thing we want to ask here is, whose voice is that? So again, that inner critic's voice that's just going up, saying all these things, having all these thoughts, whose voice is that? Now, sometimes when I ask this question, the person will say, well, it's my voice. It's just my inner monologue. And that's okay. If it sounds like your voice, no problem. But for some folks, this can be a kind of aha moment where they realize, oh, that inner critic's voice sounds a lot like my mom's, or a lot like my dad's, or a lot like this other influential person for me at some pivotal point in my life, probably in childhood. So again, we're not going to do anything with this information right now. We're just going to notice it. We're going to name it. We're going to bring that curiosity. Whose voice is that got in there all those years ago and led you to believe you were anything less than lovable and amazing? And the second piece of this is to separate ourselves a little bit from our thoughts. So you are not your thoughts. You are a person having thoughts. And as I said before, thoughts are involuntary. They drop in based on how we're feeling internally. And again, they're often repeat. They're often old. They're often not useful. They certainly aren't usually factual. And that's what's important to realize here. Thoughts aren't facts. So we're going to start to separate ourselves a little bit from that thought that's happening in our nervous system by verbalizing. Instead of saying, I'm not good enough, I invite you to say, I have the thought that I'm not good enough. I have the thought that I'm unlovable. I have the thought that something's wrong with me. And again, just noticing, what's it like for you to do that? It might feel very subtle and very small, but for me, this practice has created a little bit of space in between the thought, I'm not good enough, and my body's anxious response to that. When I'm able to pause and name it for what it is, this is a thought I'm having. Thoughts aren't facts. It actually creates space. It starts to uncouple these thoughts in our brain from what we hold as true, what we hold as factual. All we need is a little more space there, a little time. So I have the thought that I'm not good enough. And then with that new space, it allows time and opportunity to create something new. Now, we know through neuroplasticity, we can rewire our brains till the day we die. We can keep changing things, shift our beliefs, change our thoughts. So a little technique for that here is, once you've named your inner critic as just a thought, get creative and figure out what is the opposite of that thought, or what is the thought you would like to have. If you were feeling your best self, your most vibrant self, what is the thought you'd like that voice to say? So again, a simple way to do this is working with the opposite thought. If your inner critic is thinking, I'm not good enough, try, I am good enough. I have the thought that I am good enough, and just feel what happens, what shifts internally. Again, it's subtle, but this is how we start that rewiring process. We create a little space from the thought itself, and then we input something new, a new possibility. The thought that you're awesome, you're amazing, you're totally lovable and good enough. Of course you are. So that's our first top-down exercise for working with the inner critic and shame. And now I'm going to share with you a bottom-up exercise for working with these icky kind of feelings. Because sometimes we just honestly can't get out of our own heads. We can't get out of that overthinking, and we need to get into the body and use the body to release that energy or that impulse that is maybe stuck there. So when we are feeling shame, our bodies typically move in quite predictable ways. You might imagine, if you see someone who's feeling a lot of shame, or if you just imagine what does that look like if someone's feeling really ashamed, we constrict, we get smaller, we want to disappear, we get tinier, right? Everything kind of rounds in the back, the chin dips down, the eyes want to lower, we don't want to meet others' gazes, we don't want to have this openness to the world because it's very vulnerable. It doesn't feel very good. So naturally there's a little bit of this shrinking inward. The feeling might be like you want to curl up underneath the covers and disappear, or curl up into a little ball. Make yourself as small and tight as possible. So that may be the feeling associated with this in your body. And one of my teachers of Somatic Experiencing, Dave Berger, shared a word with me that I have always remembered, our posturetude. So the idea of posturetude, it's a made-up word, of course, but it means how your posture and the shape you're holding in your body reflect how you feel on the inside, your attitude, what's going on internally in your nervous system. So we're going to work with this shape. I'm going to invite you to just kind of feel into your body for a moment and even go into that shape of shame a little bit. So only like 5%. We're just doing a tiny version of this, so it's not overwhelming, but just about 5%. Let's go into that shame shape. The head might dip down, the shoulders kind of slump. Maybe you feel things kind of going inward a little bit, your bubble shrinking, things not feeling so good. And then we're slowly going to start to move into the opposite shape. So feel this really coming from deep in the chest, very deep inside. It's like the heart itself is just starting to lift or move forward just a little bit. And I'm not even arching back here. I'm literally just sitting up straight and kind of letting my heart shine forward a bit more. So we're expanding, we're opening up, we're doing the opposite shape in the body as shame. And now we're going to go back and forth. So taking your time, you might exhale as you feel 5-10% of that shame, that inner critic, that icky, ugly feeling, and then come on back up. And it might feel tough to come out of that. If you're used to being in that shape, it might feel hard. So if it feels challenging to come up and expand, again, just expand 5%. Let's just go a little bit. See if your heart can lift the tiniest amount. See if your chin can lift the tiniest amount, and what happens in your body when you sit in that shape. So let's explore back and forth a few more times. We're helping to resolve this impulse to contract and to shrink. We're showing the body it can also expand. It can also be in this prideful shape, this confident posture. And guess what? We can go back and forth. That's the beauty of having a human nervous system. We get to feel different things all the time. Just notice, does it get easier to do this movement? You might notice when you're rounding, your gaze wants to go down toward the floor. And when you're coming back up into that prideful, expansive, confident shape, your gaze goes out into the distance. Suddenly there's all this space. We want to look around and take it in. So we'll do one more, and then we'll come on back to neutral. Let's feel that pride, confidence, and then again, just back to neutral. So settling back into whatever is a comfortable shape for your spine, your shoulders. And we're really going to take a moment to notice here how that was for your nervous system. What do you feel in your body? I always feel like I'm sitting up a little taller after I do a few rounds of that shame and pride posture exercise. There's a little more lift in my chin. Well, I hope that you're feeling a little more soothed internally and ready to be just a little bit nicer to yourself today. So again, give yourself a big squeeze for joining in today. Thank you so much for being here and using your nervous system to play with this exercise and come out of shame.